If you allow technology to be applied, it makes things better and cheaper. As everybody gets richer, as more things happen, the things that are not touched by technology just get more expensive and take up a bigger and bigger share of the economy. Then you can ask, okay, so what is AI and technology going to do to media?
It's as AI slop and AI entertainment takes over the entertainment piece of media, the part that gets more valuable is learning what to want, learning who you want to be, and curating your information sources. And in that, humans play an outsized role.
If we could go with the 10 to 20 year time frame, I would say this is going to be looked at as the chaos era. This is a moment of transition between major periods in technology, in culture, in the media, creating a ton of volatility, a ton of power redistribution and chaos that is ultimately going to lead to a new kind of order and something better, but in the moment feels messy as hell.
Hey, I'm Mario, and this is the Generalist Podcast. You might have heard the saying, the future is already here. It's just not evenly distributed yet. The mission of this podcast is to host deep conversations with the founders, investors, and thinkers who are living in that future to help you see it earlier, understand it better, and capitalize on it. Today, I'm speaking with Chris Best and Hamish McKenzie, Substack's CEO and Chief Writing Officer. Substack is arguably the most interesting media company in the world right now. It's become a transformative force in the landscape, creating a new economic engine for culture. With over 5 million paid subscriptions and tens of millions of active readers, Substack is building something that I consider truly revolutionary. A platform where creators own their work and make money directly from their audience through paid subscriptions. In our conversation, we talk about Chris's grand unified theory for how AI will influence content creation, the inside story of Substack's clash with Elon Musk, and why the ceiling for great writing and culture might be much higher than we're currently imagining. Given my work at The Generalist and love for writing, these are all topics that I was extremely excited to talk about with Chris and Hamish and loved hearing their perspectives. You'll walk away with practical insights about the new media landscape, creator economics, AI, and what great information and writing looks like in the 21st century. This is a new podcast, so if you like it, I hope you'll consider subscribing and joining us for some of the incredible episodes we have coming up. Now, here's my conversation with Chris Best and Hamish McKenzie. This episode is brought to you by Vanta. Warren Buffett once said, it takes 20 years to build a reputation and 5 minutes to ruin it. For today's digital companies, those 5 minutes have shrunk to milliseconds. This asymmetry is why trust isn't just earned, it's demanded. If you're building a business, you likely know that proving compliance is needed to win bigger deals, enter new markets, and deepen trust with customers, but that it can cost you real time and money. By automating up to 90% of the work needed for SOC 2, ISO 27001, HIPAA, and more, Vanta gets you compliant fast, opening doors to next-level growth opportunities. Not only does Vanta save you time, it also saves you money. A new IDC white paper found that Vanta customers achieve $535,000 per year in benefits, and that the platform pays for itself in just 3 months. Over 10,000 companies like Atlassian, Factory, and Chili Piper use Vanta to manage risk and prove security in real time. My listeners can get $1,000 off Vanta at vanta.com/Mario. That's VANTA.com/Mario for $1,000 off. This episode is brought to you by Brex. Fred Adler, the influential venture capitalist of the 1970s, was known for displaying decorative pillows in his office that featured a signature business philosophy: corporate happiness is positive cash flow. In today's post-SERP environment, Adler's wisdom feels particularly relevant, as founders need to make every dollar work harder. That's exactly what Brex delivers. Their modern finance platform was built specifically for startups like yours and designed to help extend your runway when capital efficiency matters most. With Brex, you get global corporate cards with up to 20x higher credit limits and no personal guarantee required. Their banking solution has no minimums and no transaction fees, while letting you earn high yield from day one with same-day liquidity. Best of all, Brex knows you were born to build, not juggle spreadsheets and finance tools. Their AI-powered platform brings cards, banking, expense management, and travel all in one place. It's simple, scalable, and designed to get you back to what you do best, building. More than 30,000 companies, including 1 in 3 US venture-backed startups, trust Brex to help make every dollar count toward their mission. Join them at brex.com/Mario. Chris, Hamish, it is fantastic to have you on here today. Thank you so much for being here. I am so excited to talk about Substack and the future of media, things that all three of us love to chat about. And maybe to begin, I'd love to just start with a little introduction about Substack, the vision behind it, the mission that you're building, the scale it's at today, because I think that I would imagine almost everyone who's listening has interacted with Substack in some way, but they may not know it. So, Chris, maybe you could start us off.
So Substack is a new media app. And, the big version of this, we see it as we're building a new economic engine for culture. And so if you're somebody who has something to say, a writer, a podcaster, a video maker, a publisher of any kind, Substack is kind of like your personal media empire in the palm of your hand. It lets you do all of that, own your work, and make money through paid subscriptions. And if you're somebody who, wants to subscribe to the best media in the world, Substack is a tool that lets you do that. We've been growing for years. I think we can announce this is going to be, I think, relatively new when this airs, that we've passed 5 million paid subscriptions.
Oh, wow. Amazing.
And, tens of millions of people actively subscribing to Substacks.
Amazing. Well, we're going to talk a lot today about the future of media and the future of Substack, but to begin and set the stage a little bit, maybe we can go back in time and hear a little bit about how Substack started and why this was a mission that spoke to you. And I know that, Chris, you were sort of the person who looped it in with Hamish, so I'll let either one of you jump in there. But I'd love to hear a little bit about that.
Well, I'd done another company before this. It was a messaging app called Kick Messenger. I met Hamish and Jay, who's our other co-founder there. And after I left that, after working on it for 8 years, I was taking some time off. And I've always been an avid reader. I've always believed that the things you put into your brain, the things you read and listen to and watch are not just a form of entertainment. They shape how you think, how you see the world, and ultimately who you are. And so great media is valuable. And the people who make great media are basically heroes. Not to, put too much shine on you, Mario, but I think the thing that you're doing here, yes, it's a podcast, yes, it's a newsletter, yes, it's a media business, but I think this stuff is important. Right? It changes how people think. It changes how they understand the world. And yet a lot of the current internet, this is in 2017, didn't feel that heroic. The state of the legacy media was kind of, was then and remains in shambles. We have these massive ad-supported social media platforms that have tremendous business models and work really well for them and for advertisers, but are not necessarily aligned with the people making or the people consuming the culture. And so I was taking some time off after my last company and I was like, I should be a writer. How hard could it be? And I was writing, you have that good programmer's hubris. You're like, I know how to read. I know how to type. It should be great. And I actually started writing what was going to be like a essay or a blog post or a screed, kind of just like complaining about all this stuff. I was like, wah, 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 the newspapers are dying and maybe Facebook is bad, blah, 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 blah. And I sent it to my friend Hamish, who's actually a writer, and he let me down gently, or as he tells it, he gave me some notes basically saying, yes, it's okay. Listen, we know it's 2017. Maybe the legacy media business models are in trouble. Like this is not the shining new insight you imagine it is. But the more interesting question is, let's say all of that is true. What could you do about it? Like how could this be different? And that sort of like became that conversation turned into the original idea for Substack, which is actually the same idea we're pursuing today. And it was both like, a very grand idea and a little bit like, a little bit grandiose. We're kind of like, we're going to reinvent media on the internet and make a thing for culture and like put people back in charge of their media diets and da 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 da. But also we were like, okay, but there's this initial incarnation of this thing that people would want tomorrow that we could build. That's kind of like this very simple, humble seed of that thing, which was let anybody start a paid email newsletter. And that was both a very sort of like practical, doable piece, but it was also like the thread at the start of this grand thing.
Now, Hamish, Chris mentioned that you had worked as a writer. You were a writer. You were a journalist for many years. You've written, books of your own. When you look back at sort of the media landscape that Chris was writing his screed about in 2017, if you had to trace back the sort of original sin, like where do you see that coming from? Like, if you could, whisper in the ears of a young Mark Zuckerberg, is there something that you could have, set us down a different path, or the creator of the very first listicle? Where do we start?
Yeah, it all ended with the black and gold dress. No, the
yeah, exactly.
Well, I think these problems are not to do with any one actor or the intention of any one person who started a new business on the internet. I think these are structural things. The internet came in and essentially laid waste to old business models that had traditionally supported media. And so it started with Craigslist, kind of. They took out the classified business that newspapers relied on so heavily. And then Google and Facebook came along, and YouTube a little bit later, and just were much better vehicles for the kinds of advertising that used to support other media businesses, even more so than classifieds. And so it was always going to be difficult for the traditional media businesses to recover from that. And it wasn't because Mark Zuckerberg was evil or was hell-bent on destroying the media and building something in his image. And then later on, actually, the streaming services have come along. They're making it even harder for the existing television businesses, the TV news business, cable news, etc. So these old business models that were designed in the 20th century, maybe even the 19th century, are being attacked from multiple angles, and by some of the greatest media technologies that the world has ever known. And they're great in the sense of like extremely effective. They've got goods and bads and highs and lows with them. And so by the time 2017 rolled around, the physical illness that traditional media had was already well and truly set in, and the body of that whole institution was getting weaker and weaker. And social media, which was physically very strong, had the business model that was really, really working maybe too well, and bringing in billions of dollars for those companies that got to own the benefits of it, was sort of introduced into a world, or like starting to reflect kind of a mental illness where people were struggling to understand each other and seek to solve important problems together, and instead were kind of engaged in this fight for attention, which the incentives of social media tend to encourage. And so the things that you would do on these major news feeds, whether it's Facebooks or Twitters or Instagrams or whatever, were nothing to do with seeking truth or looking to understand each other, but a lot to do with reactivity and like really heightened emotion and kind of divisive type of engagement and community type stuff. So by the time 2017 came along, things are looking pretty grim for anyone who was considering a future in journalism or the media or as a writer. And no one was looking at writers as a like potential customer base to hold up the next era of giant technology companies.
Yeah, that didn't I imagine feel like an obvious bet for anyone. But I really love what you guys are saying around that. It felt like such a big idea in some ways. You're playing with the grandest possible canvases of billions of people connecting around culture and creating it together. But also you managed to find this thing that I would guess felt really small to a lot of venture investors when you started pitching it. And so I'm curious both how you landed on like that first sort of insight around, no, it should be helping newsletters, run subscriptions, and two, sort of like, yeah, what the conversations were like with those first VCs?
Well, there were existing examples, and there was Ben Thompson who'd built Stratechery. There was Andrew Sullivan who'd done the Daily Dish. And so there were some existing examples of people who had, I guess, what we considered kind of shockingly good businesses. Like, we did some napkin math and guessed that Ben Thompson was making over $1 million a year, from his bedroom in Taiwan writing this email newsletter.
That's amazing, but it's like still you saw the early signs, but that's like, just two folks at the very tip of the spear. And it's not like they're huge businesses, right?
But here's the thing is, if when you're starting out making something very ambitious, you try to make something for the entire eventual audience of it, that usually doesn't work. It's pretty hard to, sometimes you can get really lucky in that universe exists. But in my estimation, it's almost always better to start with something that's like the greatest thing in the world for like literally 3 people. If there's a way that you can then take that and expand it to be 10 people and then 100 people and then 1,000 people, et cetera. Because if you start with something that's kind of like pretty good for 1 million people, it goes nowhere. And it's not just like we didn't just sort of like take this on faith. We were thinking through why this was happening. Why is it that people are like, why would people pay for one of these things? What are the currents in the world that are causing people to realize that their money is no longer their scarce resource, their attention is, they're not happy with the media diet they're getting, the deal that, creative people across, the whole internet is getting worse and worse in a bunch of ways. Like you have to be able to look at a thing that exists today that some people will buy, but then also try to like accurately or like make a bet, I should say. You have to make a bet on where the winds are blowing, like where the world is going. And if you can get both of those things right, I think that's how you make change.
Hamish, was that something that felt like it landed with the first sort of cadre of investors that you spoke to, or did it actually take like, I don't know, a lot of matchmaking to find folks that really resonated with that?
Yeah, first we had to make it land with a few writers. And I remember in the early days, we were saying you can use Substack to start your paid subscription publication. And it was just confusing enough that people weren't quite getting it. It was like, oh, do you mean like an academic journal? Do you mean like a magazine or something like that? Mm-hmm. And we're like, no.
People didn't know what a Substack was yet.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, the idea of a Substack was waiting to be introduced to the world. And we eventually decided to simplify it and just say, well, it's just like a paid newsletter because there's this email element and there's a web element, but you don't have to like know all the bells and whistles before you start. And once we settled on the idea of saying we make it simple to start a paid newsletter, it meant we could go to all these other writers who are already doing newsletters on services that were designed for email marketing in many cases and not for writing, not for editorial, and say, come over and use this thing, it's better. And you have the option to get paid by direct subscriptions. And we think this model can work really well for you. And once we had that story nailed, then it's a story we could tell investors. And some immediately got it and saw the potential. And some were like, who's going to pay for newsletters? How many Ben Thompsons are there in the world? And I think, you don't need every investor to say yes. You need some people to get it. And a couple of people early on, I remember Mike Kearns at Chernin Group was one of the early believers, and Andrew Chen became an early believer later on. And that's all we needed. And I think it feels like a small thing. Start a paid newsletter, get paid for writing stuff from the audiences who care enough about it to pay. But that is actually a major thing. That is a big transition. The idea that you can have recurring payments for this and work that you consider important, and that the people who can get it will like not just sort of begrudgingly pay for that, but they'll be happy to pay for it. They'll be in this game with you. And once that becomes possible and proven, then all sorts of things are newly possible.
There's a version of Substack I could totally imagine that is like a really much smaller but sort of thriving indie business, sort of like the widgets to tip a creator or buy a cup of coffee or, whatever those things are.
We totally should have done that.
Yeah, it sounds like it would be so much easier. Was there a moment where you had to like kind of kill that, lighter weight version of things to really pursue the mission? Or was it always just no, we're going as big as we possibly can with this?
I'd had sort of a taste of this thing at my last company where we kind of got to that, hundreds of millions of people using it. And I'd say that experience maybe increased my ambition of what's possible. And so for me personally, the fact that I felt like we were onto something potentially quite big and transformative was the thing that made me want to work on it in the first place. If somebody wants to make a tool for tipping on websites and it's a cool lifestyle, it's a great thing to build. It's interesting. It's fun. I could see why that would be a worthwhile thing for somebody, but that wasn't what made me, pour my life into this thing.
For me, there's kind of a moral impulse as well. Like if we felt like if this could work for Bill Bishop, the first ever Substack writer, that's really interesting. If it works with Daniel Lavery, a totally different sort of profile to Bill Bishop, who's writing for librarians and not business people, that's even more interesting. And then maybe this could work for lots of writers. Maybe this could work for all types of creators. That's super interesting. That's kind of profound. That means that we're sort of unlocking energy from the universe that was previously hidden. And once you discover that, if that's true, I feel like it's incumbent upon us to sort of see how maximal that truth can be, because that kind of thing can have a really meaningful effect on the media ecosystem, which in 2017 and today still really is in a pretty dire state.
Yeah, we weren't wrong about our assumptions. The idea that the internet was driving us crazy, we haven't become less convinced by that in the 8 years since.
So it's you should go as big as possible, and maybe someone comes along and crushes you and does it better, or takes over along the way. But otherwise, there wasn't a long line of people waiting to come and help writers at that time or help the media at that time. It was actually a lot of tech companies had come and gone, had spent a bunch of money and tried different approaches at it, and had failed. And the common wisdom at that time was just that content isn't really a good business. There's no billion-dollar tech company to be built on content.
I hate when people call it content.
I was going to say, even the word content feels so unpromising, right? It feels so calorie-less.
Begs the question. It's just, what is it? Oh, it's the thing that's contained. But what are you talking about?
The only good use of content I've seen is, I'm sure you've seen Patrick Collison's LinkedIn page that says content strategist, which is just a content strategist.
Yes. Yeah, it's much better.
That's very good. I love this, the way you said this, Hamish, of, unleashing energy from the universe. And today when you look at Substack, it does just feel like this incredible energy has emerged from it. This incredible creativity has come from it. It's almost, I think of it sometimes almost like a city where you have these different neighborhoods. You have the food folks, the culture folks, the business folks, and actually those people, sometimes cross over, sometimes they stay where they are. Sort of with that metaphor in mind, I don't know how good it is, but which were the neighborhoods that you were really shocked to see pop up in the Substack city, and which are the maybe the empty lots where you have an eye on them and say, actually, we could really see something amazing happening here.
I mean, I'll tell you, early on, there was a real question that, investors and even we had was, is this going to work for anything beyond business? Because it struck, you've got Bill Bishop, we had a bunch of people who were making kind of things that you could pay for that could help you with your work and that you could conceivably put in a corporate credit card. And that felt like a pretty well-established thing, but it came as a not a surprise, but sort of a pleasant development to us that actually a lot of, that stuff is still doing very well on Substack today, but it's a minority of what's on the platform. There's a lot of stuff that's working really well. I guess there's more. I kind of think of Substack as an index fund of culture. And for everything that there's somebody out there that's really into, there's usually something. And there's just, people are into more stuff than I would have been able to think of or list. One thing that I do think I wish we were stronger on, and I think there's people doing it and they're doing good work, but I think the platform could do a better job of is just fiction in general. I think fiction's really important. I think the idea of serialized fiction is well developed and could work well. And I think the overall preponderance of fiction on Substack, I think if we could crack the code on it, could be higher.
You might have seen my eyes sort of light up when you said that. One, because I know you're the son of an English teacher, and so that's your good your background doing excellent work there. But two, because I think that's feels such a big opportunity that no one has really nailed. I really enjoyed the article the Substacker L. Griffin wrote about I think it's called "No One Will Ever Read Your Book," and it sort of breaks down the state of the publishing industry, especially for fiction, and how just very, very tough it is for anyone to crack it. And
she's since crowdfunded a book successfully on her Substack.
I just invested, so I'm a nice. Small participant. But yeah, it feels like there's such an interesting opportunity there. What do you think the right way to sort of to cultivate that further looks like? Maybe Hamish, you can tell us a little bit about that.
Going to make us write some checks here that we can't promise on cashing in the immediate future. Well, we've already had people serializing books on Substack to some success, and then get traditional publishing deals at the end of that serialization, where the book becomes this physical memento, this monument to that work, and that gets exposed to new audiences in that way. We've had people who are write their draft in public. A lot of Jonathan Haidt's The Anxious Generation was first published on Substack for his Substack after Babel. I think there's kind of interesting ideas around community participation in a book, where you publish chapters or you publish as you write, and you get feedback from people and keep on adjusting the narrative in response to the feedback. I think there's ways that the product could evolve to more perfectly suit this style of publishing, but already what you've got is enough for something super interesting. I'd love to see books live on the web in the future as well. I think it's kind of criminal that books don't live on the web. You can't have a website version of your book. Something like Substack allows for that, because if you want to make money from selling the book, you can still put certain chapters behind the paywall, and then have it read out to you by the AI voice that's really high quality. So I think there's tons of room for experimentation and exploration within the Substack model, within the Substack platform for books. We've already seen plenty of success cases, and I think we're going to see a lot more. And we'll keep evolving the product to perfectly suit those needs, won't we, Chris?
I'm not trying to pin you down to anything in particular, but you mentioned how it's worked for different books, and I've seen some really interesting projects over the past few weeks in particular, when I've been learning about this a bit more. For fiction in particular, do you think there's sort of certain things that are required? You mentioned writing in conversation with your audience. I always think of Andy Weir in The Martian, where he sort of wrote bit by bit on his blog, and then that has since become a massive hit. Wondering if that type of storytelling in particular requires different tools.
I do think there's some practical stuff that we could improve. One thing I think about a lot is, because Substack started in and still has a major component that is email based, a lot of our metaphors are sort of email driven, right? It's you get a new thing. When I subscribe to somebody, I get a new thing in my inbox, the new one's at the top. And I've read fiction on Substack before. And the problem that happens to me is, I'll start reading it. I'll read the first chapter. I'll get the second chapter, read the second chapter. I'll get the third chapter, and I'll not read it immediately. And then next thing I know, I'm getting the seventh chapter. And so my new email is here's the seventh chapter. And I'm oh wait, I got to go find the third chapter, or where am I in this thing? And the fact of getting the serial in slices is not actually the ideal way to get it. And if we were solving that problem, the thing I would imagine is, I might have one updating, that thing should actually be grouped into one logical story. It could update as it goes. It could bump up when there's a new one, but it would remember me as the reader where I am and help me kind of go through it in the right order. I think that would actually go a long way.
Yeah, I really believe there, will or can at the very least be a future in just the same way that you have Netflix and Amazon that wins Oscars. Maybe there will be a National Book Award winner that was first published on Substack.
Sure. And you could publish a TV show on Substack too now by the same token, right? And you would want it to work the same way. You want it, if I go to the Netflix show, it remembers where I am. It remembers what episode I've watched. I could pick up where I left off. That's just what people expect now. And I think it's more important for fiction, because reading it in order is more important, and reading it in a timely fashion is less important.
That's really true. You mentioned, with TV shows, and one of the things that I think you guys have done so interestingly over the years is sort of progressively expand into different mediums. You have, podcasting now, video, chat, short posts. Each of those mediums sort of has their own, strengths and weaknesses, you might say, their own little flavors. How have you thought about like managing potential tensions or trade-offs between those different mediums while, trying to retain the parts of Substack that make it unique and make it special?
Yeah, one way I put this is that a lot of other, platforms that you might think of got built up around a format. And so, Instagram was pictures, and then Snapchat was disappearing pictures, and then TikTok was short form, and so on. And Substack is not built around a format. Substack is built around you. It's built around the subscription relationship that you have. And being able to unlock that to be every format that you want to use is a design challenge, right? It's hard to make an app that has all of these different, short form social media-ish posts and long form articles and podcasts and videos, short form videos, and like maybe other like chat. There's all these things. It's hard to make put all those together into one package in a way that's coherent. And I actually think we still have a lot of work to do on that. I mean, the thing we've kind of done is we've like built a bunch of these things. They're all kind of working. It's exciting. And then sometimes when you open the Substack app, you're like, oh my God, what's happening here? Like there's so many different things. So I think we have still some work to do to kind of like bring it together into a simple package. But listen, our thing ultimately is like, you should be able to create in every format that you care about and reach your audience. And you shouldn't be limited to, oh, I've got a subscriber on this platform, so I can only ever make videos. I can never write, or vice versa. And in the world of, all of these new AI tools that are coming online, it's getting easier and easier to get creative leverage, right? The idea that you could have an AI that you talk into your phone and sort of magically turns it into like a usable artifact is possible now. You can already read, listen to things that are written in the Substack app with like a great AI voice that sounds awesome. Like all of these things are becoming easier to translate from one medium to another to sort of like make highly produced stuff in audio and video without having to, hire a team of nerds every time. It's a new world. It's exciting.
I certainly want to talk more about AI at some point. But Hamish, I'd be curious for your take on the fact that, Substack was certainly created in response to the fact that we sort of have spent our attention pretty badly over the past decade plus on, short social media, short videos. Do you ever like have a worry as a writer yourself that as that sort of starts to come into Substack, because it's so addictive or because our minds seem wired to, want to consume this, that actually, short video ends up taking time away from people reading the, great piece of fiction or, George Saunders Story Club, whichever these great pieces of culture that are on Substack, sort of shifting that focus a bit.
I'm actually really excited about what's possible when you get that short form feed and discussion and discovery in the context of Substack, where everything is based around deep relationships that leads people, when these things are like the front door, opening up to a path that leads people down to a subscription or like a kind of relationship with a creator or a writer who they really care about. I think what we've seen so far is that those kinds of technologies, the Twitter feed, the Facebook news feed, Instagram, YouTube, etc., are extremely powerful. People are going to spend their time there. TikTok is the latest one. And they're going to spend their time there whether we like it or not. I'm going to spend my time in lots of those places, a lot of those time for like my snacking time, my relaxed time, my casual browsing time, even though I love to read books, even though I love to watch documentaries. And given that that is true, and it's very obviously true, these are the platforms that culture is happening on to a large extent, and there's billions of people using them. Wouldn't it be interesting to see what happens if you rip the ads out of them and give them the job of maximizing these deep relationships instead of maximizing how much time someone spends doom scrolling? And I think what we're seeing in the Substack network is that can create something pretty fucking interesting. and a different type of experience in those feeds where when you leave the Substack feed, you don't come away feeling dirty. You don't come away feeling like you misspent your time, and you've actually likely started a bunch of interesting relationships, either by casually following a creator or actually fully subscribing, maybe even paying to subscribe to a creator who you might not have known about otherwise. So that's really exciting to me, because I think it lessens the grip that those other platforms have on society's mind, and it strengthens and gives power to the types of creators who are doing quality work and just need to help that work, just need some help finding those audiences who are going to deeply appreciate that work.
Anecdotally, I will say that you phrased that perfectly. When I use Notes, for example, which is, the sort of Twitter equivalent on Substack, I don't feel dirty. And
Good.
I'm not really sure why. I haven't really totally cracked why it feels like a different experience. Maybe it is the absence of ads. Maybe it's just like
Elon's not on there yet.
he's not on there yet.
I will say
he's probably somewhere on there.
I will make the subtle distinction that it's not just the absence of ads, although personally I hate seeing ads. It's annoying to me to have my experience interrupted by ads. But the ads warp the incentives. The ads change. The advertising being the business model that makes those whole companies run, mean that they have to point the algorithms for their feeds at the things that serve the advertisers, not the things that serve the people who are consuming the culture and who want to connect with great creators and consume great video, audio, text, whatever. And so it's like the difference between an internal combustion engine car and an electric car, where they kind of look the same, right? But the experience of driving an electric car, where there's no gear shifting and there's just pure, smooth, instant acceleration and torque distribution, is so much nicer and so much better than driving an internal combustion car, which is predicated on all these explosions happening under the hood of your car. And the externalities, the external outputs are also completely different. Like the gasoline car pollutes the atmosphere, and electric cars are much friendly to the environment. Same with the Substack feed versus the other feeds. The other feeds end up polluting your mind, and the Substack feed maybe can even cleanse your mind.
Can even cleanse your mind.
Yeah.
That's the new tagline.
Cleanse your mind.
Yeah. Might be an
ominous,
overpromise,
actually.
but you don't come away feeling so polluted. Let's leave it at that.
Yes, absolutely. And, I think it's interesting. It's just from like a pure business strategy perspective. I think Notes is such an interesting and intelligent sort of addition to the platform, because it is this top of funnel. But as you said, the pipeline is working in your favor as a writer or a creator rather than sort of against you, where, certainly on Twitter and X, you can go viral, let's say. And I would sort of very carefully chart how many subscribers did that create and how many paying subscribers did that create. And it could be a really tiny number because, it's just such a diffuse pipeline. And so, that's such an interesting thing from a creator's vantage. It also, I think, brings up the conversation, the internet of beefs, battle royale between Substack and X. For those who maybe didn't follow that chapter closely, can you explain sort of why there is some degree of intense competition there and how sort of creators maybe got caught in the crossfire a little bit?
Sure, I'll tell the original story. Elon Musk bought Twitter a couple of years ago, and one of the things that he had his eyes on early on was bringing Substack into the Twitter fold more. He actually thought that these companies could work really well together. And on the face of it, it seems like they do complement each other. Lots of people discover Substacks through Twitter and then go on and pay to those creators on Substack. And I think Elon's view was probably like, well, Substack is effectively acting as a paywall for Twitter, that these two things should just be together. And so he tried to convince us that we should join forces in this way. We actually have a different vision of how this all should play out. And we like the more integrated system that Substack has, where there's not like an ad-based feed that has sometimes competing interests with the deep relationships feed or the deep relationships platform. And so we're like, we're not eager to do that. And in the meantime, launched our social networking type feeds, the Notes product. gave Elon a courtesy heads up about it the day before we did that. And then when it came out, the next day, people on Twitter freaked out and said, well, here comes the Twitter killer. Substack's got the Twitter killer, which is not how we were positioning it. You can't just instantly make an amazing social network on day one. It takes time to like build that ecosystem up. But it didn't matter to Elon. He saw it as a direct shot across the bow and mute Substack from Twitter, essentially immediately cut us off from their API, suppressed all the links that were going to Substack publications. Even for a couple of days, you couldn't search for the word Substack in Twitter. It would just return results for newsletter. He accused us of stealing data in the meantime, and which is totally bullshit. We were just using the API in a normal way. But that created the impression that there was this big beef going on. But to us, it was kind of like, we're Ukraine and he's Putin. He just decided to start bombing us. And we're like, why are we getting bombed? We're just trying to build this ecosystem. And it hasn't hurt.
Way to take the temperature down by using a neutral metaphor.
Yeah. Sorry to all the
Yes.
Russia fans. So we just continued, essentially. Twitter was already becoming a less important share of traffic for Substack publications. It was really painful for a few, but it was a good thing to happen for Substack ultimately, because it forces Substack to continue building the kinds of things that help writers and creators on the platform grow without making them dependent on these capricious and volatile social networks that don't really have the creators' interests at heart. They're mostly focused on their own platforms and the advertising. So that's basically what happened. I think Elon's interest has like moved on to other things at the moment, and so like maybe that
he's got a few things that he's on his plate.
That beef has become like a small medallion on the corner of his vast plate.
Yes, his very vast plate. When you mentioned that there was some point where there was the discussion about how you guys maybe would work together. Did you ever get to the stage of thinking, actually, maybe there is a way to do that in a deep partnership or even an acquisition? Like, did it ever get to that sort of level of conversation?
It's not something that we were keen on. We've always wanted to build Substack as a successful sort of independent endeavor. We think we're building something wholly new. And when there's been conversations about, hey, should we join this or that company? I think in general, it would break the thing that we're trying to accomplish.
Yeah. Like philosophically, these are such different businesses, right?
Yeah. And it's not, I think it would be hard to make the thing that we're trying to make in a context like that. And we are seeing this now. Like we've been working on the Substack app and this sort of like this network concept for years and years and years, because we knew it was going to become critical. Because in the early days of Substack, like I think when Elon did that, he thought he could sort of kill Substack. He thought we were wholly dependent on it. And although it was, I don't want to diminish it, it was very painful for many, Twitter users who had Substacks, who like had this thing. It was no fun. But from a systematic level, it was basically a rounding error by that point. Like it didn't matter. But there was a time like in 2019 where that actually was true. Like basically everything on Substack was downstream of, used to be able to like tweet out a link and everybody would see it. And you could get like, that experience you were having, you get like a ton of subscribers. And so a lot of our early growth was driven by this effect. But we knew there's two problems with that. Number one, you're still just downstream of the Twitter incentive structure then, right? If you're saying my whole business depends on my top of funnel coming from this other network, I still have to play the game of that other network. And I'm still kind of like beholden to that incentive structure. And then the other part of it is just practical. It's like, well, it's not really in there. They don't care about your business working. In fact, maybe it's a negative. And so you saw this kind of, and not just from Twitter, but they blocked us. But then since then, it's basically all links are deprioritized. I don't think Substack even gets particularly special treatment anymore. We've seen all kinds of vagaries. Meta for a long period went through a period where they just didn't allow any political content because they're just like, we don't want this. And, fair enough. But then if you're a political journalist or podcaster, like, what does that mean for you? And so, we want people on Substack to be able to promote their work on every place, like put it everywhere, have the podcast feed, put it on YouTube, put it on Twitter, put it on TikTok, like, of course, but you don't want to be wholly dependent on any of those things. You want to have at least one place where people can discover your work in a way that actually wants them to find it and fall in love with it and go deep on it. And that thing working is a big part of why it, that you use that city metaphor, that Substack can kind of feel this way now. You kind of have this sense of like, there's a whole set of stuff out there that I can go and find. That's happening because there's this, this discovery piece of the equation where people are proactively coming to Substack to, keep up with the things they're subscribed to and love, and then find new things to fall in love with. And you're talking before about, I'll add one more thing to this before I completely filibuster. But you're mentioning like is there tension between short form and long form in that? Like,
yes,
by adding the notes feed, does that, is there some trade-off of like some time that I spend on Twitter, I could have spent reading a book instead? Like, what's the deal? I actually think I can see where that comes from. And like, at some logical level, like that's true. But in practice, I think the reverse is closer to true. Where if we built Substack to be the Eat Your Vegetables platform that says there's only going to be ultra long form, dense works of, extreme journalism here, the net effect of that would not be that all of a sudden there'd be way more steep long form stuff. The net effect of that would be many fewer people would use Substack. It'd be harder to make money as somebody working on Substack. And so as we've been building the discovery feed, the thing we've seen again and again is when you do something that's good, when you actually make a change to it that really works, you get these like across the board wins where it's like, hey, we made it better and people saw more things in their feed, but also they read more long form posts, but also they discovered and subscribed to more things, but also they retained better and came back more often, but also they paid more money. Like there's sort of like a version of this thing where when you make it actually genuinely good, you don't have to be a monk to read interesting stuff on Substack. You just kind of show up, you've got this feed, but then in your feed, there's like, oh, here's this quote from this really interesting article. I click into it. Now I'm reading this interesting article. Then I read the next one. You can kind of like make a universe that's helping you go deep and helping you become a better version of yourself by giving you something compelling instead of giving you something compelling to try to like erode your attention span in your mind.
We're such magicians that we can trick you into being a decent person.
We will trick you into reading quality writing, please.
Yeah. Decent persons too isn't an overclaim. We can trick you into reading and watching and listening to good stuff. That's good enough for us.
I remember when we were chatting back in 2023 when we wrote a case study on Substack. You guys talked about how you think of the company as a tool, a network, and a destination. And I think what you're saying there is really like that network and destination piece really helps every other publication on there. You need it to be a destination to drive all of these people in. And then those people do, find these great pieces of content, even if, it's totally fine that they also engage with shorter form things as well.
A great example of one such platform exists, and it's probably the best one for media on the internet at the moment, which is other than Substack, which is YouTube. Not only a giant business, but a place for like quality stuff, the historic and contemporary, where people are bound in these relationships. The relationships, I actually think that there's lots of room to improve on YouTube though, because those relationships are still ultimately controlled by the platform itself. And the monetization is only primarily based around advertising, which sort of sets terms for who can be successful there and what gets made and how it gets made and how it gets presented. Whereas the Substack version of YouTube is based on deeper relationships and direct subscriptions that directly support the creators who are doing the work. And I think that's going to create something pretty special. And we've just seen the beginnings of it.
This episode is brought to you by WorkOS. What do companies like OpenAI, Cursor, Perplexity, Webflow, Plaid, and Vercel all have in common? They use WorkOS to power enterprise features like single sign-on, direct resync, and multi-factor authentication. WorkOS is set apart by its modern APIs and SDKs for seamless enterprise integrations. Plus, it's free to get started. Whether you're a scrappy startup or rapidly scaling, WorkOS has the solutions you need to secure enterprise deals. Future-proof your authentication stack with the identity layer best suited to meet the evolving demands of enterprise environments. Find out how at workos.com. I think people don't fully appreciate how the monetization on Substack differs from YouTube, for example. Like there was, you'll remember the Substacker who wrote this piece recently, but there was a great piece on Substack about, a prominent YouTuber who, does food YouTubing and built like a really large audience, like 250K subscribers, producing fantastic videos, and absolutely could not make the economics work, was, effectively losing money on every video for a couple of years. And, having that direct relationship with a subscriber totally changes that.
That's right. That's Carla Lally Music, and she's a food professional, like a chef and media personality who came up through the Bon Appetit Test Kitchen, and she started on YouTube like 3 years ago. She had something like 18 million views in aggregate. 200-ish thousand people liked her stuff enough that they clicked the button saying, yes, I want to like see her in my feed all the time. 200,000 people is a like sizable audience by any measure, except by the you can only make money through YouTube ad share revenue type of measure. And so she really was making high quality videos, but it was a grind. It was a hustle and a grind. And what she ultimately decided to do was to shift all that attention and energy to Substack, where that kind of audience can really sustain you. And the economics of direct subscriptions are totally different in terms of the order you must reach to become interesting. And so she makes far more money on Substack for far less production intensive type of work that doesn't negate the possibility of doing these beautiful videos, where she gets to build over time and can make money really fast. No, I don't mean, well, yes, it can increase fast, but like the time from starting to get to sustainability with a subscription model that depends only on a few hundred or 1,000 people to support you to make it enough to live on is so much shorter than the time it takes to build up a giant enough audience that it becomes interesting for advertising. And so I think that that's a super interesting case to look at for kind of the potentially transformative effect of going deep with devoted audiences rather than trying to do the old model, which is to go wide for an audience that is kind of casually interested, and some third party comes in and monetizes it and gives you some scraps from the table.
Chris, you were mentioning a moment ago, how important it is to not be locked in by these platforms, whether it's, YouTube or anyone else. We had a really interesting sort of case in point of that earlier this year when TikTok was, briefly shut down in the US, and Substack sort of leaned into that moment, it felt like, from outside, and was able to bring some TikTokers into the Substacker fold. Can you tell us a little bit about that moment and maybe what it meant for the business?
Yeah. One of the things that Substack offers, as you know, is ownership over your audience, right? So when somebody subscribes, you get their email, you can import emails to your Substack, and you can also export them. So if you decide for whatever reason Substack is not working for you, these are your relationships. You can take it to another platform, you can, reach out to them. You have these kinds of options. And we've always felt like that's important. We think of it, primarily as like exit rights, right? Like if part of the reason you can trust Substack is because if we start to like turn evil, you have this right to leave. And that just doesn't exist on other platforms. And we, the drama around the TikTok ban, we felt like was just a moment that was taking that like abstract idea and making it really suddenly real for a lot of people, and I think it's still unclear what's going to happen to TikTok in the long run, but whatever happens, I think it just caused it to be really front of mind, definitely for YouTubers, but also for people on Instagram and on YouTube, saying like, oh yeah, if this platform shifts or changes or, goes in a direction that's not the direction that I want to take my work, what's going to happen to me? And so we went to a bunch of TikTokers and said, hey, you should start a Substack. And, at least you should collect an email list so that you have this list. But also we've built a bunch of these really good video tools. We have this very easy to use live thing that goes right from your phone. We've got this thing. And we had a bunch of people launch, some of whom have been extremely successful. Maybe the case study for this is Aaron Parnas, who was like a very famous, political reporter, TikToker, like news TikTok, right?
He's sort of like a TikTok
might
news
say.
personality, who would like translate the political news of the
Clear
day
that
for his audience.
none of the three of us are huge TikTok natives, it feels like. There's
Excuse
probably
me,
some
during this
sharp
period,
lingo
I also
there.
created my TikTok account and started
really?
making TikToks.
Oh God,
I went viral once. It was thrilling.
You did? What did you post?
Well, not very, but I don't know. I
It was
posted
a
something
sexy
about, like, hey,
dance.
here's why you should
yeah,
start a
that's what I
Substack.
expected.
But yeah, and he's got a Substack now, and it's going gangbusters. It's this, and it's, I think, if I'm reading some of like the notes he's posting about it, and we've talked, but basically it's like the thing that it feels like it enables him to do, right? It's not just because when you make money through subscriptions, it's not just about like how much money it is, although that obviously matters. The money hits different, right? The fact that people are there supporting you because they believe in the work means that you can make your money doing the best work, not just by like trying to go viral or trying to hustle for sponsorships or trying to do whatever thing. I think it has felt like it's transformed for him, like what kind of work he can do and what kind of ambition he can have with it. And I think that there are a lot of people on other platforms of the internet. It's not everybody, right? It's not that everybody on TikTok has an audience that's champing at the bit to subscribe to them, or on YouTube, or on Instagram, or on anywhere else. But a lot of them are. And they're disproportionately ill-served, right? The people who have maybe not like the most enormous audience, but whose audience like deeply values what they're doing, those people could not just, have the benefit of having an email list and all that stuff. They could make more money on Substack. And so we're working on bringing the word to them.
Well, I'm sure you will. When you sort of project forward 5-10 years, imagine that we do have so many folks from TikTok aboard. You have great food folks, just several orders of magnitude bigger than it is today. Let's say, what does the sort of consumer behavior look like? Like, will people just have to get used to the fact that a larger percent of their budget goes towards information that otherwise was free? Is it that people do start to bundle and that becomes an important part of it? How do you think that plays out?
People are already willing to spend money on culture that they value, and it's not because they're not dumb to do that. They're smart to do it. If you think about, if you listen to an hour-long podcast or you read a book, what is the opportunity costs that you're paying in your time, your life, your attention for doing that? And if you could pay a couple bucks to get something that's a more valuable return on your time and your life, is that worth it? And I think there's like a very large number of people today for whom the answer to that is a resounding yes, but who have not yet had the opportunity to do that. And so I think first, like the highest order part of this is like, are we as a society investing like too much, too little, or just the right amount in great culture and rewarding people who are making valuable media? I would argue we're paying way too little. And there's a much higher ceiling than what we have today. People are going to pay a lot more, and they're not going to grasp about it. They're going to feel like, this is great. I'm like able to get all of the stuff that I really care about. I think there's some limit. I think there's ways that we can work on making the economics of it kind of like maximally favorable to people on both sides. But I think the highest order bit is just like, it's worth paying for things that are good.
Yeah, I'm interested. I wonder where that share of wallet ends up coming from. Even if we say, okay, that obviously can't scale limitlessly, that people will just spend all their money on information, as much as my gimlet eyes at the generalist would love it. Does it come out of sort of traditional education where people are saying, hey, it's actually much less important to me to spend several hundred thousands of dollars on university when I can, really learn how to code or learn how to invest or, learn whatever it is from Substack, several Substacks that I subscribe to once a month. Hamish, do you have any thoughts on where that share comes from or how you think that plays out?
I think we should get Chris to talk about his grand theory about how the economy changes as AI starts to eat more jobs and how that shifts
I would
the
love
spend
to.
as well. I think that's probably an interesting place to take it. But people have a history of making room to pay for culture they care about that no one used to pay for Netflix. I guess it's shifted from cable a little bit. No one used to pay for, I guess I was about to say Spotify, but I guess that shifted from like buying records individually a little bit, but it probably contribute to increased spend in other ways, like on shows, on merch, etc. But I think the AI revolution take is a pretty interesting one. Maybe
It's a good time for a grand theory.
Yeah, let's give a grand theory, Chris.
Well, okay, here's a grand theory, which is technology in general makes things better and cheaper. Like if you allow technology to be applied, it makes things better and cheaper. And, I think we could you can calibrate to be how much of a believer in this stuff. But I think, AI is this insane general purpose technology that we're just at the start of starting to kind of like apply to the real world. And I think some people, even people who are in the AI space deeply understand the technology, but haven't grasped the economic side of this that much, because they're sort of like everybody will run out of we'll have no jobs anymore, and we'll need to have some UBI thing for all but that's not actually what happens, right? What happens as things get better and cheaper as the economy adapts, there are other things that get more expensive. Basically, the pieces that are not getting, whatever pieces are not getting automated, there's a thing called Baumol's cost disease, if you frame it in kind of like a negative way, but it means that, as the opportunity cost, as everybody gets richer, as more things happen, the things that are not touched by technology just get more expensive and take up a bigger and bigger share of the economy. And then you can ask, okay, so what is AI and technology going to do to media? And on the one hand, it's going to make it better and cheaper, right? It's going to make it easier to create content. If you want to make a highly produced piece of media, if you want, you're going to get to a world where, two people could make a feature film in their garage, and it's going to be better than anything you could have made, a decade ago. And so on the one hand, you're going to have the same effect where all of the stuff gets cheaper to make. And if your view of the purpose of media is to be kind of like a drug, where its effect on you is the only thing that you care about, what you're going to have is magical, AI media wireheading being a science fiction concept where you can kind of you just watch super AI TikTok that's 100 times more powerful than human TikTok, and you just kind of bask in this glow of thing, and it kind of cooks your brain for you.
Endless free drugs.
Endless free drugs. That's probably going to happen to some extent. Yeah, people are going to do that. That's going to be a great business. It is what it is. But, in my mind, that's not actually the main purpose of media and culture. Media is not just about getting what you want. It's also about learning what to want. Right? It's shaping how you think. It's shaping what you value. It's shaping who you become. Right? Ultimately, the media culture, the conversations we have, these are the human alignment problem. They're not solved. And so as the price of, the cost of generic content falls to zero, which by the way has already been happening. We already have the internet. There's already more things to read than I could ever read, more video to watch than I could ever watch. And that's just going to get even more extreme. And it's the stuff that I can't watch is going to get higher quality. But in that world of information abundance, the relationship that you have, if Substack is about people, the relationship that you have with people you trust is going to get more valuable, paradoxically, because you need to know how to curate your attention. You need to know what to care about, what to pay attention to, what to spend time on. You want it to be a multiplayer game. You want to be participating in a culture that other people are participating in. You don't just want to have, there will be people that just have fake AI friends and that live their whole life that way, but that's not what everybody's going to want. And so in that world, as this Baumol effect happens, I think you could have kind of a benign version of it where the creation and participation in human culture becomes actually a larger share of the economy as all of the things that are kind of like can be made cheaper and abundant get made cheaper and abundant. And in that world, what's the right amount for people to spend on Substacks? I think it's much higher. I think it's an exciting future.
It's as AI slop and AI entertainment sort of takes over, the entertainment piece of media. The part that gets more valuable is learning what to want, learning, who you want to be and sort of curating your information sources. And in that, humans play an outsized role. And so you're sort of picking those influences on yourself. Is that a fair summation?
Yeah, basically. And we're going to need new cultural norms to deal with all this stuff. But yeah, the trust relationships that I have become more valuable.
Hamish, when you first heard the grand unified theory, what was your response? How much do you buy into that worldview?
I buy into it a lot. It pumps me up. I think I've always thought that writers are more important than developers, which is something I said.
Oh, we always, I agree, of course.
He tells me that every day.
Well, I think...
Gosh, this is like the only company where you have to listen to that and take it.
Yes. Yes, the writers are the kings here.
Have to. Maybe it's too strong, but...
Writing, obviously, being the greatest technology that humans have ever invented. And so in the sense that we're a writing company, we're a technology company, but we're all of culture. It's not just writing, video, audio, etc. But I also think that's at the heart of what it means to be human. This is the way we evolved, through leaning on each other, through evolving together as social creatures with strong social bonds, and that the sharing of culture and storytelling is essential to that very bond, which is at the center of all of human existence. And so to get even more grandiose and airy-fairy about it, the thing that gets valued in this new economy is less the I get something, I get a piece of content from you, or I get a piece of content from some machine. It's more about soul connection. I know that there's another human on the other end of this, and that when that human thrives, I thrive too, and then we grow together. So I completely buy it. I buy it on the new agey type of level. I buy it on the economic level. I buy it on the technological level, and I'm excited for that future. And I think it's a future that's worth building towards, and the future worth feeling hope for.
I hope all the generalist listeners and please subscribe to my Soul Connection, because that's the future that we're talking about here. Yeah. On just one more point on the AI front before we maybe talk about media landscape today. What are the accretive ways for Substack to lean into AI? What are the places that it makes sense for empowering creators with this technology?
Well, I think anything that is giving people creative leverage is an obvious place to lean in. One of the things when we started with writers, there was a bunch of things that were good about Substack, like the business model's good, you can make this money. But one that I think is maybe is not less obvious is just the fact that we kind of made it really easy. If you're an individual person who is a great writer, who has something to say, that's hard enough and rare enough. And there were people like Ben Thompson who happened to have something really good to say and be technologists and product people and entrepreneurs and be able to kind of invent this stack and this thing for themselves. But there's a lot more people who just have something to say. And so one of the things with Substack is we want to have this sort of Promethean instinct to say, we're going to just bring this power to you and make it really easy. If you're a great writer, come and type into this box. And if the thing you type is great, which is hard enough, but if it's great, you're going to get rich and famous. This is a magical machine that's going to take care of the rest of the things for you. That's what we aspire to. Yeah, there's a big settings page you have to go to sometimes, but that's sort of that's at least the animating spirit of where we're trying to get to. And I think something that's happening not in the distant future, but is currently today very possible, is you can do that for many more kinds of media. So we have an example of this. We're working on this live product where you can go and open the Substack app, call someone up and have what's effectively like a FaceTime call with them. And it gets broadcast live. Your subscribers can tune in. That's cool. But the most important part of it is it just kind of sets this expectation that you can basically just show up and talk into your phone. You just go and say, hey, it's like I'm calling you. What's up? How's it going? And then because we have this new suite of AI tools, we can in the back end go and say, all right, take this thing. Oh, they didn't have the perfect microphone. Okay, AI, fix the sound. Oh, it was the front-facing iPhone camera. Okay, turn it into a high-quality thing. Fix the lighting. Make it look great. Okay, they went and did a long live. Go and just like edit it. Cut out the boring parts. Find the clips that are really good. And so there's going to be this, what used to be possible only for writing, you're going to have with multiple different media types where I can just kind of show up and talk into my phone. And if the thing I have to say is great, I can get rich and famous. I can make $1 million. Jim Acosta was a CNN anchor who quit CNN. His only computer was like the company computer. They took it away. He didn't have a laptop anymore. And he got the Substack app on his phone and he went live and just did it by himself. Didn't have a whole...
And got an instant media business out of it. People showed up in droves. They were like excited to pay to subscribe to support him and get what he was purveying, which is he hasn't paywalled any content, so no one's getting content that they're paying for, but they're paying for that soul connection. And talks to his hand, has an instant media business in the space of seconds.
Because the face don't give a damn. Sorry, that's the 90s kid in me. Never mind.
Please keep that. Don't cut that.
Cut that part out.
Don't cut that. It's genius.
That'll be the clip we lead with.
Jesus.
How far do you think you might go, or do you see the possibilities of going around like new mediums, for example? Like, there could be a version of this where the writer brain in me is like, well, there could be really cool text adventure games that, artists might want to create. Like, what are the constraints that are important to keep before, things get too unwieldy, maybe?
I think it's really hard to predict. I think we're in a period right now of genuine technological advancement, genuine discovery. And I don't think anybody can accurately predict where it's going, what's going to work. I think you see very interesting things where the state of the technology has progressed way ahead of how we figured out how to use it. And so like the classic example of this is you had GPT-3, which was this amazing, you could look at it and say, this is crazy. It's like unlike anything we've ever been able to do before, but kind of like, I don't know how to explain it to my mom. And then you give it this chat GPT wrapper that's just like, oh, the thing you want to do with it is talk to it. And then boom, it takes over the world. I think there's going to be stuff like that happens in media. I don't think we even know what all the formats are going to be. And I think the only stance you can take, or the stance that we take right now, is kind of just like being open-minded, being willing to kind of like play and explore and watch and like test the fences, push the boundaries, see what's becoming possible, see what's working, kind of like be willing to be on the forefront of change as it happens, and to like bring the latest cool stuff back and like give it to people in a way that they can actually wrap their hands around it and use it. There's a lot of things that are possible right now that if you like know how to use Hugging Face, you can like get AI models to do, but it's just like, it's taking that and like making it actually accessible to people is like there's a very powerful moment right now for that.
Yeah, there's still several layers of friction.
You also asked what has to be the constant, the nucleus that sits there and is always true for Substack. And that is kind of the model, this model that gives the creator ownership and power, that they can totally own their audience and export it from a mailing list, that they get supported directly by their audience, and that the platform that undergirds it, which is Substack in this case, can only succeed if they succeed. And if you keep those three things in harmony, then all sorts of like expressions of culture and content are possible as long as that thing is stable and constant.
Hamish, as a old media person who became
not that old
media person,
I'm in my 40s.
I was waiting for it. I knew it was coming. That became, a new media person and at the vanguard of this movement. I'm curious how you think about the positioning of these prestige brands of the past and present. Like if you were to be airdropped into insert prestige media brand here, The Atlantic, The Economist, The New Yorker, like what would be the things that you would do in your 100-day sprint to try and prepare these publications for the next couple decades?
I think something that's core to their identity doesn't have to change, which is to like maintain these high quality standards and journalistic ethics, and retain this sort of prestige aura, but accept at the same time that their general reach is going to probably shrink. They're not going to be able to command the kinds of audiences that they once did in the heyday of these publications, when there are fewer options and fewer choices for audiences. I think those things, like the best of them, can always have a place. A lot of them will continue to struggle, and many of them will probably disappear over time, just because they have this business model sickness that is going to be impossible to recover from. The world is different in 2025 than it was in 1925, when a lot of these things were born. But there is also ample opportunity to rebuild, to build the institutions of the next era, things like the Generalist, or the Ankler, or the Bulwark, or the Free Press, all of which are being built on Substack and can benefit from these tools that let you create an instant media business and then plug into a subscriptions machine, which is the Substack network, the notes feed, the recommendations, etc., that helps you grow just by dint of being part of this enormous community. And I don't think there's anything that should prevent those existing institutions, the prestige players like the New Yorker or the Atlantic or whatever, from participating in this new economy and for building for it too. And so if I were the New Yorker, I wouldn't be investing all my resources in just growing the New Yorker magazine bigger and bigger and bigger, but I'd be looking for opportunities to foster new voices and build a new generation of editorial products in the Substack ecosystem, or in some other ecosystem that resembles Substack, that has a similar sort of rules and a similar sort of ecosystem, a similar like community of people who care about culture. So it's like a little bit gloomy for the people who are still trying to run off the fumes of a business model invented in 1925. But it's very bright for those who are willing to embrace the business model of 2025.
Amazing. Well, we like to end each episode with some lighter but also philosophical questions. So maybe we'll jump into those. The first one is one of my favorite, and I try and ask as many people as I meet this question because it's just a secret way for me to build a great reading list. Chris, maybe you can start us off. If you had the power to assign a book to everyone on Earth to read and understand, what book would you pick? And you can't say Hamish's Insane Mode book.
Please, just forget that one exists.
Maybe I don't agree with the premise of the question. I would pass. I would just say like, hey, I don't think forcing everybody to read and understand something.
Interesting.
I'm like, yeah.
What would be bad about that?
Yeah, I guess like forcing people to read and care about something that just I think is important feels immoral to me. I'm like, it should be, I'd want people to read the thing that they read, that they want, that matters to them. And I'm not so confident in my own worldview or my own taste or my own model of the world to think that it should be forced on everybody.
That's a very interesting answer in its own right. So I think you're the first dissenter I've come across. Hamish,
I'm nothing if not disagreeable.
Would you venture to prescribe a book to us all?
I'd massively embrace this opportunity to force the culture that I prefer on the masses.
It's not forcing at gunpoint. I want to clarify. No one's being harmed in this thought experiment.
I was envisioning everyone strapped down on a gurney with a book forced in front of their eyes, and the words just get pushed into the brain.
Yes, exactly.
I might actually say the Canterbury Tales. I've only read some of them. It's a huge work, and it's hard to fight through the prose of Chaucer.
You're assigning one that you haven't even read, to be clear.
I read a good
deal.
You
have not read and understood this. You're
and the
already
part
ready
I read,
to force it on everybody.
I just require everyone to read and understand it at the level I understand it at, which is a rudimentary, basic level, because the storytelling is amazing, and the language is beautiful, and it's a exceptional mix of the profound and the profane. It's a total high-low kind of culture book with important messages about humanity, such like not everything is as it appears. And the ones who present themselves as the most virtuous are sometimes the ones who have the most corrosion of the soul. So Canterbury Tales, get into it. Good one. Maybe you can get ChatGPT to like give you a tidy summary in modern vernacular. Okay, but that's my pick.
Perfect. I'll see if Chris will join us on this one.
He's gonna
practice
poo-poo all of these questions. If that was his pose on the first, what book do you think people are gonna read? What's he gonna do with the rest of these?
Yeah, it's hard for me to imagine. I look forward to seeing it. Maybe you will wriggle out of it. What's a practice that we should borrow from another culture or era?
Okay, I'm from New Zealand. My mum was a Māori teacher. Māori are the indigenous people of New Zealand. This is one I default to a lot. Whenever they get up to talk publicly in front of the group, they acknowledge their ancestors. There's another kind of saying, I guess, called mata waka, where they referring to sitting in a canoe and in the Māori canoes, which they migrated from far-flung lands from to New Zealand in. They paddle they rode with their backs to where they're going, and so they're looking at where they came from. And I think this is a very useful concept and honoring of what you're building on and what you're contributing to, and moves you out of this particular moment that you exist in. So mata waka and like acknowledging your ancestors, and whenever you get up to speak in public, I think are like very good grounding practices that remove some of the ego of your current life and help you build on something that is greater than yourself and greater even than the current moment you're in.
I love that.
Beat that, Chris.
Yeah, let's see.
I think we should
pillage like the Vikings.
Pillage like the Vikings. No, I mean, I think we should create new rituals. I think that, the idea of having ritual, of having sort of like things that are kind of sacred or done repeatedly, is a powerful sort of human technology. And I wouldn't advocate for, adopt old religions in order to get those things. But I think the fact that we're missing those things is a bug. And I think we should be inventing new versions of the old forms.
So he means Scientology, by the way.
Yeah, exactly. Final question. What will the historians 100 years from now say about our current era?
How long is the current era in this hypothetical?
You could define it however you like, I suppose. Whichever, you could say the current era we're in is maybe 10 years long, or maybe you'd say actually this era stretches back 50 years because it's all part of the same movement. I leave that to your hypothetical historian.
If we could go with the 10 to 20 year time frame, I would say this is going to be looked at as the chaos era. This is a moment of transition between some major shifts with some major periods in technology, in culture, in the media, that is creating a ton of volatility, a ton of power redistribution, and chaos that is ultimately going to lead to a new kind of order and something better, but in the moment feels messy as hell.
How does that strike you, Chris?
It's a good answer.
That's why I went first, so you wouldn't say that first.
I think this will be the AI transition. Maybe a way to put this is there are little decisions and little quirks of fate and butterflies flapping their wings happening right now. And it's hard to predict which ones these are. But I think the moment where this technology is coming about, where we're figuring out how to build it, where we're figuring out how to build a culture around it, it's a moment of extreme leverage. And so I think people will look back And in order to explain a lot of how their world is 100 years from now, they'll be able to go back and like look at, a blog post that you wrote, Mario, that had something that had some ripple that caused some AI researcher to think about something. Or I think we're getting to like lay the foundations for a new era of sort of technological civilization, which is exciting.
That's a perfect note to end on. I knew I would enjoy this conversation, but I think I enjoyed it even more than I might have imagined. So thank you both for being here and for chatting with me.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
That's it. Thank you for listening to this episode of the Generalist Podcast. Please subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or your preferred podcast app. Ratings and reviews help others discover these discussions. So if you enjoyed the conversation, I'd be grateful if you could take a moment to leave one. For all past episodes and more, visit us at thegeneralist.substack.com. See you next time as we continue to explore the future.